Howdy, howdy, and welcome back. All right, it's another Workshop Wednesday. This week we are doing Beyond Basics, so it's a little bit more in-depth, and we're going to talk about how to use and work with user ID in Google Analytics 4. Before we go too far into this, welcome if this is your first Workshop Wednesday. My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I am the co-founder of a company called measurementmarketing.io, and whether you found us through podcasts and talks, through maybe some other platforms we share a tiny bit of our content with, maybe you're already a member over at measurementmarketing.io. And remember, we've got different levels of the academy. We have free levels called the Toolbox, where you can get access to the tools and some weekly training. We also have paid versions of the Measurement Marketing Academy as well. It's our job to help people like you learn all these crazy cool tools, and that means staying up to date with the latest and greatest. And of course, that means right now, Google Analytics 4, which is going to steal the show for the next probably year or so. So with Google Analytics, we're going to actually debut, not debut, but talk about Google Analytics 4 and Tag Manager in today's workshop. Of course, I mentioned the Academy earlier. There's tons of training back there. It's like every course you could ever want as a measurement marketer. Google Analytics, Tag Manager, GA4, Data Studio, strategy stuff, right? How to think about all this. Plus instructor help, et cetera, et cetera. And remember, there are different levels from free all the way on up to different paid versions. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. Right now, though, it is time to get officially started. Beyond Basics, working with user ID measurement in GA4. Of course, we're going to go ahead and bring on our returning champion, Julie Brade. But first, how does it fit into the framework? We plan, we build, we launch. We're all marketing in the blind. We need to use a system that, just as a byproduct of using a system properly, produces the results we want. In other words, it manages the activities for us, and we focus our activities. What are those activities? We have to ask results and how questions. We gather information needed to get answers to those questions. User ID is one of those pieces of information you're going to know how to gather after this training. Then we're going to think about the actions to take based upon the results we get. Then, speaking of, are the results being measured in GA4? These would be like conversion events. You make sure you're using UTMs properly and structuring them properly so they tell a natural story of which traffic sources are producing which results for you. Then we listen to the conversation that's happening between the users and the website. Based on those trends and patterns, we can start to forecast our near future trends and patterns, and then we measure against those forecasts. That's how we optimize. It's where we know where to focus our results. So that is the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell, and of course how today's lesson fits into it. All right, it is that time. Julie Brade, guest instructor. Those of you who are Academy members back there at the Marketer Edition or Professionals Edition or Academy for Agencies and Teams, you already know Julie. She handles the entire measurement team here at measurementmarketing.io, works with our instructor team to make sure that all of our Academy members at the various paying levels are getting access to the Ask Instructor support and getting all the answers they need there. And of course, handles this stuff constantly working with different clients, some that use user ID, of course. So Julie's going to show you kind of how she uses it, how to think about it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the setup as well as soon as she's through with that. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and flip over my screens and let you take it away, Julie Brade.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Mercer. So we are going to come into our favorite display tool, Lucidchart, to kind of walk through what it is that's happening currently. So currently inside of GA4, you are going and viewing something on your desktop or maybe your mobile or maybe your tablet. And what Google Analytics is going to see is that you are an anonymous user. You're not associated. It's not as easy for them to see that the phone user and the desktop user are the same person. And so kind of to demonstrate that, we're going to pull in our little circles here to say currently, GA4 is so much better than Universal Analytics, but you will see like a little bit of an overlap from the user that's here to the user that's here on different devices. Perhaps you have very specific questions that you really need to see the useful truth, meaning is this really the truth versus what GA4 is telling you by the out-of-the-box implementation? In order to see the really useful truth, you need to set up user ID measurement. And the way you get this useful truth is when a user logs in, so they're not anonymous. Hello, let's say that one better. They're not anonymous anymore. They are actually, let's say user 1234, actually user 1234. Meaning after they log in, so before they log in, you're not able to really see everything going across different devices. But when they log in, You can see user 1234 on desktop, you can see them on mobile, you can see them on tablet. Meaning, let's say they're on social media, they opt in and consume some content on the phone, and then on desktop they go through and purchase. And that way you're able to kind of see that story, tell the story inside your dashboards, and be able to tie that together so that you can optimize base and get more users like this and kind of understand the user journey better. And again, this is only really if you have those kind of questions. If you don't have those questions of like, what are they doing on their different devices? Are they coming through in multiple, like, is their user journey? Like for us, most of our users are always on desktop just because it's a membership site and it's easier to consume the material that way. So we really, it's not that big of a deal for us to have this set up, but obviously we're going to have it set up so we can demonstrate to you. But if you do have some sort of site, especially those e-com sites, that you want to know that if people are coming on your phone and desktop, you definitely want to be able to have this set up so you can answer these questions of how users are going through, and are they doing this or are they doing this? You never know if they're actually both using them equally. And you, again, the only way that's going to be able to do this is if you can capture when they log in and be able to pass that information through. So it's definitely going to be different from each platform to platform, depending on your CRM or your membership site or whatever it is that's sending this data through, or that can. And of course, we're going to use Tag Manager to help us tell the story. And we are already in our config and page view tag for Google Analytics 4. And what we have here is the field name on the fields to set is user underscore ID. So quite literally, this is all you're going to need. You can ignore everything else that's below here because it's nothing to do with our user ID. We have user underscore ID, all lowercase, and then the value that we're sending through. Again, this is going to change from platform to platform. You can always, cookie something, you can grab a value that's in the URL if there's some sort of saying like, hey, here's contact 1234, and use that. So whatever it is that your system does, whatever you have, whatever your dev team is able to do, pass that through as the value. So this would be the value that they're actually sending through, and you're telling Google Analytics 4, this is the field that I need you to use. This is the field that Google Analytics 4 is going to look for certain kinds of reports. And let's go ahead and go into Google Analytics 4 and I'll show you what those look like. So right now we are under Explore, and then by default you start here in this section, but you can go over a little bit farther and you have User Explore. If you don't see this, there's probably not enough data because Google Analytics 4 usually likes to have at least 24 hours of data before it's going to show up. But even then, if it's only 24 hours of data, it's going to be very little usually. And so you'll want to give it a few days for it to start showing data before you get in here. So if this has not been published, you're not going to see this here in your explorations. You need the data first. So that's just a little heads up there. You can go into your user report, Explorer report here, and you can come in and just see this is us playing with the data and kind of trying out different options. But basically you can see how you can tell if this was an actual user. Again, this is us just playing with the data, like what this user is actually doing. Again, just to get a trends and patterns, not necessarily that we care that one particular user is doing something very specific, but maybe the trends and patterns, like maybe everyone is doing a certain behavior before they buy, and that might help us get more people to do that behavior. Maybe they need to see a certain page, we don't know. And then another cool thing that you can do with this is you can actually go into segment overlap. That's going to look a little bit like our Venn diagrams that we were looking at. So by default, it has mobile traffic and tablet traffic here, I guess because no one wants to do a desktop, not sure. But this is kind of what we're seeing here again with our very crude setup of what we did real quick, just so we can have some data in here to show you with this. Other things that you can do is you can go into your reports and you can, let's say we go into our traffic reports. This is our customization for this, so yours might look slightly different. You can always come in here and add where, let's say, user ID. You can come all the way down. Let's type it in. Signed in with user ID. Because again, remember with our Lucidchart, they have to be signed in to be able to get this, and Google Analytics 4 knows that. So that's the definition they're using. And so then you can go through and have this yes, because that's what they did. and we're going to say okay, and so we can compare different traffic sources of users that signed in versus users that don't. And you can do this throughout all of your different reports. So you can use this in your engagement reports if you're wanting to see very specific behaviors. You can go back to your exploration reports and even use this, the same concept, with your other filters as well, to see if the users that signed in are doing specific behaviors versus the other ones that are not. Are they doing behaviors that you're expecting them to do? And that way you can kind of help understand that. And one final note, caveat to this is, let's say you have a funnel. We're going to actually come up here and grab some stuff. And so you have, let's say they're on home page here. And so home page, they would actually show up as an anonymous user. And then, or it's really not, that's not the technical term, but it's just kind of a regular user. The Google Analytics is going to see them as a regular user here. And then they log in page. And so they they go to the login page, and they're not officially logged in yet. So they're still anonymous. And then let's say they get to the membership dashboard. So they finally get here to the membership dashboard. Then you are going to see this user ID 1234, whatever it is. So Google Analytics 4 will associate, as we're using this filter signed in, it's only going to see it as soon as they sign in. It's not going to backfill this information by default or anything like that with there. So this stuff is still going to be outside of this filter. So they're not technically signed in, so you're not going to see anybody that's signed in on certain pages, or you wouldn't expect to be seeing them on certain pages, which is okay. So you just need to understand the story it is that you're telling and the questions that you want to be able to answer with that. So just be aware of this. So it's not going to backfill as of the most current truth, so only as the user is logged in, which usually is still perfectly okay depending on the story you're telling. So once you are able to implement this, again, it's insanely simple. The hardest part is just getting with your developer or deciding how it is that you want to send this information through, how you want to do it, and have that go through. And then you just go through. And so now you are able to see if a user is logged in inside their phone, does a certain behavior like become a lead, and then that same user, if once they log in on desktop, do they go through and purchase? Again, great things, great actions that you will be able to take if those are the kinds of questions you're asking. Again, if you're like us and you know most of your traffic is always on desktop and you're not going to have those cross-device questions, no need to worry about user ID. You can just continue on with the default out of the box setup. So that is your user ID measurement in a nutshell. I'm going to pass it back over to Mercer.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Now I wanted to show this, let's do a deep dive into how to actually set up that user ID in GA4 using Tag Manager. Now, this is an article which is fantastic from Simo Ahava, so definitely a guy you should be following. You can just Google Simo Ahava user ID. You'll find this post. This is a great post. It goes through all the different aspects of how to find user ID and different ways that you can get it, some of which we use. We actually use this little JavaScript snippet, right, to do that with custom JavaScript variables. You don't have to do that, though. As you can see up here, in the URL here, I just put a little contact ID equals 123. It could be as simple as that. So there's lots of different ways to find the value for your user ID. And what I want to do is do a quick little deep dive to show you. Let's pretend for a second that this is where our user ID is. Remember, it can be in the data layer. You can work with your developers and make sure it's in the data layer. There's lots of options for this. So what we're going to do is we have this contact ID that's coming through, which is fantastic. That's what we want. And we already have this coming in, let's say, from our platform, right? Our platform happens to do this. So we can theoretically grab it from the URL and then pass it through as user ID, right? So we could do that. We could set cookies for it and do that. I'm going to show you a very, very simple, just kind of like good enough to get going approach to this. I am a big believer in this particular method because it sets a cookie and then it goes through and reads from the cookie so that it's a little more persistent as people are going through different sessions. So I like this technique a lot and definitely encourage you to use it. I'm going to show you just, again, brass tacks, sort of real basic. How do you grab this stuff just at its very basic level? And so if we have this contact ID, and I know it's in the URL, and I want to be able to grab that and pass it through for at least this particular page, I can do that in GA4. So how would I do that? First, I got to get it into Tag Manager's hands. In order to do that, I'm going to go into Fields to Set, just like we can see here. You just go to User ID. That's where it's going to go. And that's it. Fields to Set and then User underscore ID. And that's the slot that GA4 is expecting the proper value to come through. Then I can create a URL variable. Now, again, I'm going to go a little faster here because this is a Beyond Basics. So you should, oops, I didn't want that. Let's go back. Didn't need that. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go into the URL variable, which is up at the top here. And we're going to set up a quick little query to say, look for, in our case, contact ID. Remember, this might say UID or whatever. It doesn't matter what the parameter is. You put in what the parameter is, and that's all we're going to say. So in this case sensitive, contact ID. I'm just going to TBV. That's the exact one it is, which it is. So that's perfect. Okay, so we've got our query contact ID. So now we're going to call this URL, and contact ID is what we're looking for. So I'm just going to take this out. All right. So contact ID is the parameter. That's the value it's going to return back with. And it could be as simple as this, where I just push through the contact ID. Now remember, the next page view might not have a contact ID, and then it's a blank user ID you're going to push through. So this is not at all perfect, but it does give you an idea of like how fast you can get it. I personally recommend this technique, which is this custom JavaScript technique, which basically reads it from wherever you need to read it from. It then sets a cookie and then you pushes it in the data layer and gets it everywhere you need to. So highly, highly, highly recommended to do that technique. But again, that depends upon your own setup and your skill set. Here, I'm just going to show you very easily how we just grabbed it from the URL. So this is the value, and we're going to pass it through into GA4 in real time. So I'm going to click on Save, and then we're going to preview this. And then what should happen is we're going to paste in our page that we're testing with that parameter so I can see it. I'm going to close out this other page, keep the confusion avoided. Click on Connect. We should see our page pop up with our contact ID, which is right in there. We're going to go back into Tag Assistant. Of course, not a lesson on Tag Assistant, but we're going to see, did it have the information it needed at the right time? So at container loaded, which is when we fired the page view coming through, did the URL even have its value? So there's URL contact ID equals 123. So that's good. Now, did it pass through? So we click on the page view tag, and there's our configuration, send server. We're going to click on values. And we can see user ID was 123. Now, final TBV, did GA4 see it? That's where we can come into the debug view here. We're going to pull that open. And let's see if this was woken up first. There we go. Look at that. User ID equals 123. So you can see it in your GA4 debug right there. Now, remember, I want to emphasize, that was very, very fast, I realize. And it's not the best setup because the next page, there's not going to necessarily be that contact ID for somebody, right? So as they continue to scroll through, which I'm going to do here, there is no more URL contact ID. So let's see how GA4 handles that, right? It's not perfect. I would much rather cookie it as a first-party cookie, so it's got a little bit more persistence to it, at least, have it persist through a data layer or something like that. But for now, let's go back into Tag Assistant and see what it saw. So at this container loaded, at this page view coming through, we come through, you see user ID is blank. And so it's not passing through that user ID because it didn't have one, because there was no URL variable. Because on this second page that I was on, when I went back to the home page, the container loaded the variable was nothing, because of course it was nothing. There was no parameter there. So I wanted to show you that technique, but just also show you a little heads up, like it doesn't quite work the way you think it might forever. There's our properties. It is set up to the user. It should go through and associate, because it is a user level property now. It should associate to all the other page views coming through, right? But I cannot assume that it will. So again, even though we see it doing it, just to be very clear, we see it doing it here. Page location, this is the home page. This is my second page view. The user ID is still associated to it because it came through initially in that first page view. But remember, using that URL, which is what we're using, that URL variable, only worked because that page happened to have it. All the other pages that don't, it wouldn't record your user ID. So again, it's much better, I think, to use this particular way of doing it. Do a little JavaScript variable. I'll let you go through this on your own because you might need to work with your developers. But Seema did a fantastic job of teaching, like, hey, here's how you grab it, push it through in the data layer, cookie it, read the cookie value. It's a little better, and you can push it through with every single event that's coming through in your configuration tags, which I think is a safer way of doing it. But again, really easy and really fast. And you can tell if you use GA4's debug that it does, because it is user level, it does push it through to all the other events, right? If I click through, let's say go to the shop page, and I want to see when I'm on the shop page, I should be able to see that pop through in just a second. There we go. Where's our hits? Come on, GA4 debug. There we go. Nope. Thought we had them. Oh, no, there I did. Maybe I did. Page view. Page location. Nope, that's the demo. Let's go through to add to cart. I'm going to go to view cart. I'm just going to do some shopping hits here so I can make sure all those are coming through. Yep, there's all our hits coming through. All of our tags being fired to GTM. So we know those are happening. But again, blank user IDs. There's null as a value right now going back to them. And if I go back, here's our hits coming through. There's our new ones. That's what I wanted to see. So let's click on some of these page views, and we can see user property still associated to 1, 2, 3. It's because way down here, we picked it off the URL. In this session, everything else is coming through. Remember, if they come back to that page and it does not have the URL in a second session, there may not be that user ID available. So that's why I like having it persist as a cookie or something along those lines, which again, this particular post from Simo Hava talks about. Just look for Simo Hava, which is his name here, and then user ID, and you'll see this pop up first. And with that, then you can then begin to use it in Google Analytics 4. All right. So with that, thank you, Julie Brade, for walking through the working with user ID. It is very deceptively easy to set it up in Google Analytics 4. You just need to know what to type in. The fields to set in this case is user_ID, and then it's the value. Where do you grab it from? Again, you saw how quick and easy you can do it with a URL variable if you happen to have it. But that only works if that initial hit has that page value. But if they come back for another session and it won't have that parameter, then that's a problem, right? So that's why I would recommend going that Simo approach that is in that blog post. That'll really help you out. So with that, of course, if you're an Academy member as a marketer or above, you can definitely reach out to Ask Instructor Support because I'll have access to that too. And Julie and the instructor team can help you out if you're trying to figure out what should a user ID be or how you might use it or if it's set up properly. The instructor team, to send them videos or screenshots, they'll be able to send them back videos and screenshots as well to help you get unstuck and on the way. So what was your one thing? I mean, for me, there was a ton of stuff. Seeing how to test it in GA4 debug, seeing how it shows up slightly differently in GA4 debug, understanding why you would want to set something like this up anyway. I think it's a good idea to set it up if you have the option to do it. Why not? It can just make things better. So why not give it to GA4 and hopefully tell a much more useful story as Julie has mentioned. Now, we talked about the framework. Remember, it fits into this stage as information because it's now additional information you can collect so you can ask different questions around users, logged in users versus users who are not logged in, which can, of course, help you with your forecast and optimization steps as well. Now, next week's workshop is a strategy session. So we're going to be doing this one really just talking to those of you who maybe aren't in the implementation side of things, but you do need to know what some of the languaging and the terminology, and there's some new stuff right now. So there's a whole thing on Tag Manager, and then there's this thing called, this GTag script, which is the gtag.js stuff. And now there's this new thing called Google Tag that they just announced, which seems like it's different, but it really isn't different. We're going to talk about all of that next week to help you wrap your head around all this stuff that Google's throwing at you. So we'll talk about the difference between Google Tag, the GTag stuff, and Google Tag Manager and when to use each one of those. So if you'd like that workshop, just be sure to subscribe. Otherwise, you can get it free as part of the free level of the Measurement Marketing Academy. We call that the Toolbox. It comes with the Workshop Wednesdays. So you always see the most recent version of Workshop Wednesday, which is, of course, what you're watching now. And then it also gives you a ton of tools. Traffic tracking toolkit. There's a migration toolkit that we've got back there from moving from Universal to GA4. Google Analytics audit toolkits. There's a ton of stuff back there that you can use, just our way of helping you to get up and running. And then, of course, if it makes sense, upgrade. If you want the courses, you want the Ask Instructor support, depending upon the level you want, maybe multiple seats for your team. But definitely upgrade to get the courses, the Ask Instructor support, unlock all the other on-demand workshops that are back there. You get access to live win courses when we reteach or update the win courses. We do that live, so you can join that as well. It's part of the benefits of being an Academy member. So please take advantage of that. Measure.tips/getacademy will give you the options there. Again, measure.tips/getacademy to learn about all the different options, including the free option of joining the Measurement Marketing Academy. And with that, we look forward to seeing you there soon. All right, that wraps this one up. This has been Beyond Basics, working with user ID measurement in GA4. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.